Okay, I think we might make a start. So come online, everybody, when you're ready, please.
Are you on the computer?
Excellent. Okay, so welcome everybody. We have Keaton who's presenting today. I did see him log on, but he's actually dropped out. So we'll just give him a couple of minutes to make his way back into the session. I've taken the role, but just while we're waiting, maybe I can actually allow this opportunity if anyone has any queries or questions with respect to the assessments. It's a really good opportunity now to ask any sort of questions, whether it be in terms of the technical skills that you're being asked to demonstrate, or even in terms of the content. If you actually wanted to raise any queries, now is a particularly good time. Okay, so just a couple of questions, a couple of reminders or things to flag with you. You'll know that the online participation continues for this week, so you'll have your participation obviously in the tutorial as well as your create tasks for this week, but there is no quiz for this week. The quiz is actually finished last week, so no quiz for week 10 and 11. Now, Joshua, you're actually accompanied by your group members, is that right? For presenting next week?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so all right, just so I can mark you all, ladies, maybe just tell me your surname so I can actually mark you off.
Yeah, Alba, Zuka.
Alba, okay. And
Mona.
sorry, Josh, can you actually repeat that for me? It's just a bit further away from the mic.
Mona, M-O-N-A.
Thank you.
Liz, can I start with a quick question about the essay?
Certainly.
We're actually meant to take an ethical stance at the end of it, is that correct?
The question is actually asked whether, if you actually go back and have a look at the marking criteria in the question as it's actually worded in the learning guide, you're asked to consider what your position is with respect to the topic. Let me just open it up so I can actually tell you the correct wording accurately. Okay, so if you look at page 16 of the learning guide, actually, Josh, we've changed it from previous years, so you're not actually asked to adopt a position and explain why you hold that position. So it's more objective in terms of discussing and analysing the arguments for and against, looking at the legal issues and applying relevant legislation and case law, discussing the issue as it relates to a framework or a model, and also talking about the theoretical perspective. So the framework or the model actually is in relation to the principles, whereas when we're talking about the theoretical perspectives, we're talking about the theories. So you may choose to discuss the principles of autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, or justice, but you must talk about at least two theories, being deontology, consequentialism, virtue theory, feminism. And you're not asked to actually articulate or adopt a position, no.
Yeah, so I should avoid things like I believe.
Yeah, that's right. So you're not asked to actually write in the first person or discuss your own stance in relation to the topic.
Liz, sorry.
It's okay, Rhiannon.
Regarding the structure, like I understand intro conclusions, pretty basic, but for the body, should it be kind of like some 4 paragraphs mixed in with like ethical and legal as such, for for and then against, or should it be like, is there any specific structure with the body that you're after?
Nothing that's actually prescribed or nothing that's required. I always find for this length of essay, when you're dealing with quite meaty topics that can become quite complex in analysis, I would distinguish between the ethical and the legal, and I would actually have, just in terms of structure and fluency in writing so that it makes clear to your reader where your argument is going, I would separate it out and I would have headings and subheadings.
Yeah.
So I would have ethical issues. I'd probably actually start with the legal issues, to be honest. So I'd probably start with the legal issues and then discuss the legal issues, and relevant case law is another heading, and then include a discussion of the cases, or you can do that together. And then I would have ethical issues, discuss the ethical issues, and then have subheadings for ethical frameworks if you've decided to cover that, and ethical theories or ethical perspectives under that.
Okay, so they're just talking about talking about the autonomy, justice, beneficence, non-maleficence in relation to it, and then at least my 2 theoretical perspectives.
That's correct. So remember, the framework and the models is not mandatory, but if you want to discuss that, you can, but the theories are. Yeah. Does that answer your question, Karen?
Thanks, by the way.
All right, thanks, Rhiannon. No problem. Sorry, Karen, you also posed
yes,
question.
thank you.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you. Okay.
So they're quite different in the sense, like, even though they're sort of really related, the ethical principles weren't developed off the ethical theories was the thing that I was wondering.
Oh, okay. No, they are standalone concepts. There is some synergy, or there's some related things to both of them, but they're not codependent. They are distinct concepts.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Sorry, Rhiannon, I actually finished that rather abruptly. Was that all, or did that answer your question reasonably?
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty good. I was just wanting to make sure, like, if you wanted it kind of muddled up together and talking about it, or if you want me to specifically go legal, these are the issues, and then ethical, and that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's not a prescribed format. So if you actually want to do it together and your discussion lends itself nicely to that, please feel free to. But in my experience in reading it and having sort of taught on this unit for a number of years, it becomes really muddled and it's quite difficult to know where the argument's going when it's done together. I just find it's much neater, it's more logical in terms of construction and reasoning when you actually do separate it out. That has been my experience.
Yes. My only other question is, if I have any thoughts that's coming from me, like regarding, like, I'm not putting my thoughts into it, but do I have to reference like every single thing I say?
No. So, I mean, we all base opinions and judgments on the reading that we have, on opinions that we hold, on learning that we get from a wide variety of sources. If the opinions that you hold are not directly attributable to one particular source in terms of something that you've read, that you've taken on and you've adopted, then clearly you wouldn't reference that.
Yeah.
It's you know, your own judgment based on a wide variety of sources that you...
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, obviously, like with the legal, it's a lot easier just to, okay, these are the references for the legal stance. But as far as the ethical point of view, it's like I might just come up with something and just run with it for a sentence or two. And that's fine. And
that would be fine. But do remember that what we're looking for as a research-based essay is not just opinion. It's
definitely.
Yeah, we're looking at what the research is. And even in terms of your construction of an argument, I mean, we say you don't need to articulate what your position is, but often that comes out, as you would be aware, Josh, you know, when you've done reading, and Rhiannon, when you've done reading, you do hold an opinion about what you actually think.
Yeah, everyone's biased, no matter what.
Exactly. So just make sure that the basis upon which any for or against arguments are are discussed are referenced with sources. So we are looking for evidence upon which the conclusions that you're drawing can be relied on. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Liz.
That's okay, all good. All right. So, Keeds, are you back in? Yes, you are. Excellent. Okay, so whenever you're ready, feel free to jump in there with your presentation. We will probably have some time at the end if there's any further questions that come to mind as we go through the content. But Keeds, whenever you're ready, over to you.
Can you guys hear me fine? Or? Yep, okay. Having a bit of problems here. Let me just stop for a second. Okay, apparently it's not working, so I'm going to do it like this, so that's cool. All right, so one of the things about the TGA, or Therapeutic Goods Administration, and I'm focusing on my case studies all on the side effects of drugs. First of all, I'm going to ask, does anyone know what the TGA is, or what they do?
They have some control over pharmaceutical goods and carry on.
Sorry,
Yeah,
Karen.
it's pretty much right. Basically, they're just a government body, and they govern over like the selling and like the safety of pharmaceutical goods, and pretty much like they have to be registered on the actual register before they can be legally sold in Australia. And so that's what it is pretty much. They pretty much it's their responsibility for making sure it's all safe for the public and consumers to use, etc. Moving on to the first article, which is by it's on the drug called Vioxx or Vioxx. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's actually an arthritis drug, and it was for sale for 5 years before it was actually taken off the streets in 2004. Otherwise, because in 2004 there's actually a new information that actually people were getting heart attacks and cardiovascular diseases from taking the drug. And basically over 30,000 people who were living with like arthritis filed suit against the manufacturers, which were Merck and Co, after like they had experienced like cardiovascular diseases. The symptoms were only visible after like the first 18 months. So it wasn't really like they didn't really know about it until like after consumers had taken it for that long. So, and it was said that when this was all going down, that over like 300,000 people were being prescribed by doctors for this drug. So it was quite heavily large scale. The concerns were first aroused in the year 2000, so less than a year before it actually came on sale. And then at that time, the TGA told the media that it lacked the authority actually ordered an investigation into it, which is bullshit, I think. And then in 2002, Merck and Co actually did a trial themselves, and then it was revealed that the side effects were increased risk of cardiovascular diseases. They did nothing about it. They didn't warn any of the doctors. They didn't warn any of the consumers or anything. They just let it be. And then 2 years later, it's off the shelves, and it's off the shelves because all this lawsuit happening. That leads into some questions now. Who do you think should be accountable for the negligence in this scenario? Should it be the TGA for refusing to order an investigation, or should it be the manufacturers for not warning anyone in the first place? This is the Go Soapbox. I forgot to add the code. Let me just find that quickly. Slide that up.
Just a question, Keats. Is the drug in question, is that a registered or a listed pharmaceutical drug?
Yeah, it was registered in 1999.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that.
Let me just put it into the chat. All right, so the code is in the chat now. So if anyone wants to just copy that and ask the question. Okay, so yeah, most of you are saying both, and I agree with that completely. And one of you said only the manufacturers. Could that person please clarify their viewpoint? Why I think TGA is not negligible?
Yeah, that was me. Probably thinking a bit more into it that both parties would be accountable, but the people making the drug should the public.
Yep.
But yeah, I would probably say both in the end.
Yeah, because in 2000, it was right before right after the drug even came onto the market, there was concerns that it was unsafe, and the TGA didn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
And so they left it going, and then 2 years later, the manufacturers found that it was having some harmful effects, and they did nothing either. So it's kind of both, but technically it should be the manufacturer's fault because not warning the doctors or warning the consumers or anything about the side effects.
The way I see it is that it's kind of like the levels. The manufacturer obviously has the responsibility because they're the one manufacturing it, but the TGA is supposed to regulate and all the registered drugs go under them. So I think it's kind of both, just in the way of they're all kind of one and the same, and it's the TGA's responsibility to make sure that these things don't happen. Obviously, the manufacturer shouldn't happen either, but it's kind of just the levels of responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. That actually leads on to the next question. What ethical standpoint do you think the TGA was demonstrating by refusing to do anything about it in the first place? Do you think they were just being protective of themselves, or consequentialist, or looking out for the people, or looking out for the manufacturers? There's another question there if you just want to answer that quickly.
I'd say they're probably in violation of non-maleficence by not acting on the information which they had. Does that make sense?
I don't know the context of it, but I guess if you were the TGA and there were concerns, if you weren't sure if those concerns were valid, then perhaps until you were concerned that, okay, yes, this is a valid concern, I'll look into it, they might just be refusing the order of investigation because it might kind of just be rumours and they wanted to find out for themselves.
Yeah,
under virtue theory. That's the only thing that comes to think of me as far as it being ethical to not do the investigation.
Because I was looking at this and I was sort of split between sort of virtue theory and consequentialism, because I was thinking that if they didn't want to do anything because they didn't know what the effects would be, if they had ordered the investigation, it would have caused a panic in the public as well. People that were already on the drug, they would have gone, file a suit already, and they wouldn't know all the facts yet. So I guess that's the reason why they could have just try to stay out of it until it was necessary. And then also virtue theory, where they're taking the people into account, where it's it's not really their judgment really, it's all about the manufacturers, trying to shift the blame onto the manufacturers. But yeah, I agree completely. Someone said utilitarianism. Would they like to clarify that answer?
Yeah, that was me. So the drug was put out, and it has an amount of benefit for all. So I was looking at it from that point of view. I think that the TGA, their mandate is to license the drug and set up codes and make it available to the public. My understanding is that there's levels behind the TGA that actually check out its safety and that sort of thing. So it was not necessarily the TGA's mandate to authorise any testing or any confirmation of its safety. That's my understanding is that's another area of the government that would do that. So I thought utilitarianism, because their job was to put out a drug that is going to help the most people.
Yep. So most of you have said virtue theory. So yeah, I agree with that. Someone like to discuss that while we're here.
I don't feel that there was anything virtuous in their decision not to investigate. I think that's not their role to be virtuous. Their role is to ensure that these drugs are safe for everybody. I personally feel like consequentialist theory would best describe what the TGA was waiting for, either information that supported the idea, whether there was any investigation going on in the background or not, I don't know. That makes sense to me. But I think that consequentialist theory would be that they would need to wait and find out what the consequences of the drugs were. Maybe it wasn't fully known until things started to happen and they responded to that.
Yeah, that's right. I agree with you completely as well. There was no need to actually jump the gun in a sense, like just try and cause a panic in the media as well. Like they're trying to like order investigation when they don't know for sure whether it's actually harmful or not at that time. I mean, now in hindsight, it looks back and they say, yeah, they should have done it. But at that time, the limited information they had at that time, it was like it's kind of hard for them to sort of order a large scale investigation into it. But yeah, I agree completely with all the points you've made. Let's move on. I actually have a video here. It's actually a trailer for a movie that came out 5 years ago or 4 years ago. It's called Side Effects. Has anyone seen that movie by any chance? Nope. I actually saw it when it first came out and I hated it. I didn't rate it at first. But then I looked back on it when I was looking for research for this assignment, and I looked back on it and actually raised some good points about what I just said about like the struggle between who's held accountable, the doctors prescribing the medication, or the manufacturers, or the governing bodies behind the safety of the drug anyway. So let's watch this for a second. And
if it's alright, I wanna kick it with you all night, have a good time, ain't gotta worry 'cause it's alright. I loved everything about him. His hands, the way he smelled. He swept me off my feet. I can get us back to where we were, Em. Promise, I can make that happen. You remember this beautiful lady here?
Hi.
How things been going with you?
I can finally sleep. I have some energy. We had sex.
Whoever makes this drug is going to be rich.
911, what's your emergency? I need help. Someone's been murdered.
There's been an incident. What do we do?
No sign of forced entry, no sign of struggle.
Where's her lawyer?
She doesn't have one. She just kept talking about you.
I don't understand why this is happening. You know her?
Would you have treated her differently if she was a man?
That's not what happened.
Em, what is going on?
I put her don't want to blister. I don't think you should be my doctor anymore.
I think she requires more observation.
Someone gets punished.
It's all going to go away.
It's going to follow you around forever.
I had no idea this was going on.
Stop! You made me do it! He was lying to her. He was lying to me. I would never be here if it weren't for you.
I want my life back.
You know I'm not crazy. Everyone knows everything.
Damn, are you awake?
Destroy that before it destroys you.
So yeah, that was a movie about a lady that was prescribed a drug by her doctor who actually had a side effect in a psychotic rage in the middle of the night and killed her husband in her sleep. And then obviously the family of the deceased blamed the pharmacist and the doctor for prescribing the medication in the first place. And the doctor was arguing that it wasn't his fault, it was the actual manufacturers. And then he tried to make a trial of that. And then he just, because he actually knew the patient as well. So I guess that brings into confidentiality as well. So it's kind of weird mixed plot about that, and I thought that was an interesting way to sum it all together.
Just while you're actually going through that, Keeds, you raise an interesting question just in terms of the health professionals' liability. I mean, in Australia, we don't have advertising of pharmaceutical products in the mainstream media. So the main way for pharmaceutical companies to get their products out there and known is by repping to health professionals and having sales reps actually go out to health professionals, clinics and places of work to actually talk them through the particular product and market the product to the health professional, who then becomes the gatekeeper between the client and the company. What do you think of that? And this is to you, Keeds, and to the group more generally. Do you see any ethical dilemmas?
I just see it as the companies using the health professional as like scapegoats in case things go wrong. That's why I don't think it's ethical. But then again, if the health professional is willing to like put themselves out there in the name of the product, by all means go for it. But it just seems like an unnecessary risk for them to, if they don't know what the drug actually does or the side effects involved.
Okay.
From my understanding, anybody that wants to sell these new drugs, they can only sell them to health professionals and not to normal people. And from my understanding, the point of that is because the health professional would be able to understand the drug itself and how, when it would be necessary or useful.
I agree, Rhiannon, and I think that's the point. I was in America last year, and I was horrified by the advertising of drugs that was on television, that I know that any normal person would have had no way to understand how that drug would be helpful to them. There's just too much lack of information behind it, which I guess we hope that doctors would be able to sort of process the benefits of that drug in relation to what they understood about your condition. But I think just throwing that open to the general public, I don't think that means you can just go and buy it, but it certainly would put people in a position to be able to go to a doctor and try and coerce them into giving them a drug that they believed was in their best interests. And so sort of it opens this whole gateway of who should make that decision. So where autonomy, I believe, is important, but in that situation, I think the whole thing gets quite muddy about whether that is going to end up being in the best interests of anyone, really.
But I think at the same time, it's kind of like, where's the information coming from? Is it like, yes, there's the doctor has their culpability, but if they're not told, or if even they're lied to in like the advertising of this drug that a med sales person has told them, I'm not sure where the culpability would be there, because if doctors have been sold drugs as like slightly different to what they actually are, I don't know what exactly that would be as such, but I do believe that the doctor does have a responsibility to basically say, this is the drug and that this can help these people, and then make those decisions and know that, oh yeah, this can treat this and this is good for you.
Well, I guess, Rhiannon, the other issue is that, whether health professionals and doctors in particular can rely on just the information that comes out from the manufacturers, and the answer would actually be no, that doctors would be expected to do their due diligence and do their research and actually find, in addition to the material that's published and disseminated by the manufacturers themselves, do their own due diligence and research to find out more about the product before they start prescribing it. But you're also right in the sense that we do rely on the system, where it be the Therapeutic Goods Administration and other safety mechanisms, to do those checks. I mean, with the Vioxx product, there would be reliance and trust that the system works, that those checks are actually undertaken before the product is released to the market. So there is a level of reliance on the system, but clearly individual matching then is the responsibility of the health professional to know what adverse effects based on the patient's condition might be applicable given the research that's out there. And it raises another issue just in terms of the objectivity of the research and the science, and whether we can rely on that. But maybe, we'll leave that for just this point in time. But some very interesting points that you guys have actually raised there. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just saying, because the Vioxx was on sale for 5 years before they took it off the market. That's a long time for people to be at risk like that. And manufacturers, they did not do anything to warn the doctors or warn pharmaceuticals or anything about the risks, and they just let it go. And all of a sudden, this lady got a heart attack and sued them, and now the whole media's just jumped on board. Now, 30,000 people have decided to sue them now and file lawsuits against them. And actually, I found this article in 2011. The manufacturers actually paid out, I think it was $950 million in compensation to customers.
And can I just say, even though there's tests and there's scientific evidence before the product is released on the market, some of the market or some of the controls is in terms of feedback. So they release it and then they wait for notifications in terms of the effect that it has on people as to know and to tweak the product. So in many, well, not in many ways, in some ways, it is a bit of a trial process too. And it's up to then the health professionals to report back adverse effects on clients and on patients, and that's how they tweak the product. And that's the thing. They didn't realize that the effects were this bad until customers started using something like that 18 months. And that's when the symptoms started showing up after that point. So that's when they didn't know, and up until that point, it was all safe, happy goings, and then that happened, and then all of a sudden it's like, no, it's unsafe. You can't sell this product anymore. So yeah, it's pretty drastic. Anyway, we'll move on to the next case study. This is actually on a sleeping pill called Stilnox. I'm sure most of you have heard of that. It's one that Grant Hackett had problems with recently, during his career. And anyway, a lady actually fell to her death off the Sydney Harbour Bridge while sleepwalking after taking this drug. And that's another side effect. She was taking it for 9 months, so it's another long-term side effect of that. It was approved in 1996 in Australia. And basically, the TGA claimed they'd be issuing warnings about the side effects of this drug for 5 years prior to this lady dying, but obviously it's not working. The manufacturers, Sanofi, Aventis, they were pretty much blasé about it. They pretty much tried to shift the blame onto everyone else. They were saying that side effects are only occurring because the misuse was from consumers themselves, mixing them with other diseases or some of that, and other having them with other pharmaceuticals and mixing them with stuff that you're not supposed to mix them with at all. So they were just claiming that it was all the consumer's fault. It wasn't. They were trying to make sure they were free of any wrongdoing.
Grant Hackett had a very addiction to this drug during his career, and that caused him to have some sleepwalking episodes, which I'm sure most of you heard in the media. He was photographed at night, like wearing his boxes or something like that at a pub or something like that. And it was also found in Heath Ledger's apartment the night he was killed, or he died. So it's some pretty shady stuff going on with this drug. Anyway, in 2008, TGA actually forced them to change the warning on the label of the packet. And so you can see in the pictures there, the top picture is what they used to give you, the sample they used to give you, which is like 20 tablets. And since that 2008 like intervention, they halved that to 10 tablets per packet. And also, I've got and I quote the warning they actually changed it to: the zolpidem may be associated with potentially dangerous complex sleep-related behaviours, which may include sleepwalking, sleep driving, and other bizarre behaviours. Zolpidem is not to be taken with alcohol. Caution is needed with other CNS, that's been central nervous system, depressant drugs, and limit use to only 4 weeks maximum under close medical supervision. So yeah, 4 weeks is adequate, since the lady that died was taking it for 9 months. You can see the difference in what they're trying to achieve here. I've got some more questions here. Do you think that warning label that I just read out is sufficient enough to protect manufacturers of any legal ramifications, or do you think it's still going to be at risk if something does happen? So that's not a question on Soapbox. I'd just like you to go answer that quickly.
I don't think it's sufficient at all. I think that there's too much. I think it depends on the scenario, but the fact that they are asleep when these things appear to happen, I think that there needs to be something else in place. I don't think that people necessarily understand what that warning means. I think most people would understand the alcohol warning, but as far as the CNS depressant, that's more of a medical term. So, you know, they might not even be aware that that's something else that they're on. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of flaws in that.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's sufficient enough either. I think that it could be very misinterpreted. I mean, I see what they're trying to go on for with like the halving of the sample size as well, but like you can't really expect people to like follow like some tiny little writing on the side of a packet just because they know if they need it, they're pretty desperate and they just shovel it in. You can't really speak for the whole population that way. Like you can't really base it on the minority or the majority. There are going to be some people that do abuse it still, and like that's going to still. I don't think that's going to protect the manufacturers because they haven't made it clear enough for the consumers. But I'd like to hear what other people think as well.
Is this a prescription drug?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so it would go through a doctor first, so the doctor would be the one who would have to check if they're using other depressant drugs, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
So it would also be a bit of the, like, if they weren't taking it correctly, it would also be the medical practitioner's fault as well. Right.
So this is where that role of the gatekeeper becomes integral, doesn't it?
It doesn't stop people though from doctor shopping and getting repeat prescriptions from different doctors. The checks and balances that are needed for that can lag behind. So people could be on it for a period of time, more than a month before it gets picked up on. And I imagine too that something legally has been feted past their solicitors, past the company's solicitors. So while it may be legally correct, it's not in the language that people can understand.
Yeah.
Right.
Kids, is the idea, but with the packaging actually only carrying the 10 tablets, then that people would require the prescription more regularly, so have that medical monitoring forced on them, if you like, rather than longer stretches without any sort of medical supervision. That's the idea there?
Yeah, that's the idea. And basically, they've said 4 weeks maximum, so they're trying to like not get people too attached to them if that's possible. They're trying and get them to not really depend on them as much as like Grant Hackett did when he got an addiction to it and he started like walking through the streets at night. And that's, yeah, I think they're just trying to like protect people of the side effects, the long-term ones, but trying to like limit their use to like as little as possible.
I think sorry to interrupt you, kids, but I think one good thing about the label is that the people who are starting it, assuming that they've read it or the medical professional has made it very clear from the start, you know that you can only take it for 4 weeks. Whereas if they didn't have that and you go back and get prescriptions and your doctor's like, oh yeah, no, you can't have that anymore. Yeah. I think that's very different, like especially regarding addiction. I think if you have in your mindset that, okay, this is what I have to do, I think it is slightly better. It's still hard. It's like with addiction, that's not anything that's straightforward, but I think it's a little better just for your mindset in that regard.
Yeah, I completely agree. I have another question on their soapbox now. Day 2004 argues that the TGA should be utilising the resources to conduct a trial of the drug, using people as what we said earlier, the scapegoats of the trial. Do you think that's ethical or not?
I don't think it's ethical because according to the Helsinki regulations for human trials, you can't knowingly expose people to risks. So if they know that the drug has a risk in the long term, they're not allowed to make people do exactly that.
Yeah, I agree with that too. But as what Liz was saying earlier, you can't really know what the effects are until you've tested them as if like on people themselves. So it's a difficult one.
I guess.
I think that. Sorry.
Sorry, no. I was just going to say. I think it turns on what you knowingly know. You know what you know beforehand, and what is still unknown. And I guess that's the issue there. So, if you knowingly release it for testing on humans, as I said, knowing that there is adverse effects, then that would clearly be unethical. But releasing it, not knowing it, and then discovering it as part of the process is slightly different. But as soon as you come or have knowledge of it, then it's your ethical obligation to withdraw it at that point.
I think that that is the human trials is kind of the last step, pretty much along the lines of what Liz was just saying. In the process, I think there comes a point with any drug where they have to say, okay, well, on a system of checks and balances, this is okay to be released, but then there needs to be that ongoing, continuing research
and evaluation. Yeah.
I think another thing to consider is that it stipulates it's over a long-term period. And like, for example, that woman with the Harbour Bridge, she was on it for 18 months. So it's kind of thing, even though you know that, okay, at 18 months you have adverse effects, at what point is it good and what point is it bad? At what point does the negatives outweigh the benefits? And like long-term period, is that 3 months? Is that 6 months? Is that a year? Is that 2 years? So I think that's something else that's a bit inconspicuous in the question.
Yeah.
Isn't this exactly what happened in the first case?
Say people consented and you have like a group and a control group and a placebo group as well. Would that make it ethical as well? If they all consented to it? And you have like a placebo group as well? Because that's what another suggestion was on this article as well. They actually suggested that it was a placebo as a method of determining if the drug is actually the sole reason for these misbehaviors or whatever.
So are you asking if we would be checking that this wasn't going to happen anyway? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm saying if the people that were on a drug like consented to like being tested on or being like monitored or for research, and say you had a control group and a placebo group as well, would that make it ethical in the way that like you'd be looking at?
I don't think it makes it more or less ethical. I think it's part of the same question, really.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, in whatever circumstance they're testing the drug, except perhaps to the extent that that second person isn't going to get the benefits of the drugs. But if they consented to that, I suppose that would be okay.
Yeah. I guess what I'm just trying to say is that, like, what's my train of thought? I think he's just trying to say that, like, if people are, like, having these adverse behaviours as a result of this drug, and he wants to try and see if that's the sole reason for that, or is it just because it's mixed with something else, or if it's due to something else, or another part of the human nature or something like that.
And that's the difficulty when you're talking about medical negligence claims and you're talking about health research, that causation is very difficult to substantiate and prove. You know, the correlation and causation is in fact one of the principles that needs to be shown in negligence, that A caused B. But how do you do that when there might well be so many other variables that impact on a person's reaction to or response to the treatment or the pharmaceutical product? And this is one of the quandaries when you're talking about medical health and medical negligence, that causation is problematic. It's difficult science, if you like. And the best we can do is not talk about causation, but talk about a correlation or an association, you know, that A tends to, or based on a pattern, seems to result in this sort of effect. But direct causation is quite problematic.
I noticed someone actually said yes, it was ethical on the soapbox. Does that person want to explain why they think it is ethical?
Yeah, I said it was ethical. I think my reasoning is just if you look at consequentialism, so in the long run, especially if you don't know the effects, it is okay to use patients for a long-term period, because if it is helpful, then we do need to see what the effects are, like the benefits and the consequences of certain drugs. If it is known to have harmful effects, I think it would be better to do an observational study as opposed to a control study, especially if it's, in this case, the drug is already on the market, there are already people using it, and there's already seen to be all these effects.
Yeah, that's a good point. Anyone else have anything to add, or?
I agree with what Maddie said. I also believe that it's ethical in the proper sequence of events. I think as a final just sort of monitoring of the drug, I think I think it's important. I think at some point they have to decide that that drug's going to be is okay and clear to go onto the market, but to then just stop it there and say, okay, it's all good, isn't going to work. So they do need to have some sort of follow-up.
Yeah. And the fact that the manufacturers are so, like, blasé about it, they was trying to, like, just to say it wasn't my fault, it's all the consumer's fault. Like, it's kind of a bit unhealthy way to go about it, in my opinion. I think the TGA should be looking into that and saying, like, well, we don't know if it's actually the consumer's fault or if it's your fault. We have to actually look into this more. And so, yeah, it seems a bit odd that the manufacturers are, like, so adamant that they got nothing to do with it.
I feel as though if they were doing that follow-up,
yeah,
what you're saying, like, why didn't somebody do something? And being that that's the TGA's role, and assuming that that was being reported, then unless there is some action taken, there's no point in having that follow-up.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
I mean, there's
also argue that the TGA aren't really, they don't have as much power as you think they have, or they'd like to have. Because, I don't know, ordering an investigation, like I said in the previous case study, it's like a matter of, like, do you, like, want to, like, cause a ruckus in the people that are using this drug already, or do you want to, like, let it go and see what happens and then file a suit if something does happen? But then after that's already too late, something's already happened.
but how much money has been accumulated in that period of time, and often that's a driving force here, the how much profit and how much money is actually being made. I mean, did you guys know, for example, that when you donate to the Australian Red Cross, the plasma from blood is actually sold to pharmaceutical companies? Not many people know that, you know.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So the role of pharmaceutical companies in directing and in controlling a lot of what happens, and I don't mean to be, you know, have a conspiracy theory, but they're large stakeholders, you know, and when the money changes hands, there's motivation and there's profit and all the rest of it. And so, you know, sometimes the standards are relaxed as a consequence. I mean, clearly the standards are there and there's regulations to control it. But like I said, I think it does create some ethical issues when those boundaries are pushed and tested. Case in point, you know, the Australian Red Cross, have a look at the disclosure or have a look at the form that they actually ask you to sign the next time that you go in to donate blood, and have a look at the fine print and you'll actually see it there, that plasma from blood donations is actually sold. Anyway, that's a different issue.
Yeah. Well, that's the end of my presentation.
Oh, quite timely. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that, Keeds. Any final comments or discussion points in relation to the topic for today? Quite an interesting one. For those of you who are interested in having a look at the issue of blood donations and the role of pharmaceutical companies, have a look at, it was an ABC documentary that actually aired on the Four Corners, I believe it was around September last year. If you have a look on the ABC website, you'll actually see the full investigation and some of the discussion that they had around the plasma donations, and they followed a couple of case studies, particularly in the States, where in fact people are actually paid for their blood donations. So they make the case and they make the story of, my apologies, they make the case, I got distracted with the screen for a moment there. They make the case and they follow the case studies of a number of people who, from a low socioeconomic background, go in on a regular basis, like once a fortnight, to donate blood. And the controls or lack of control, I should say, in terms of the screening process, with the effect of regular donations on these people and other health conditions that they have and being paid for it, and who actually benefits from what's considered to be almost blood bank factories, where you see, you know, they had shots of people just sitting in seats with the arms stretched and the blood going out, you know, 20 people in a room, and it's next and next and next, and they get their, you know, their card with whatever money is on there, and who benefits from the plasma. Anyway, I deviate. I was very passionate when I saw it, so if you are interested in having a look at that, I would encourage you to go back and have a look at the ABC website for that documentary. If you can't find it, let me know and I'll send you a link for it. Anyway, all right, well, thank you, Keeds, for your presentation today. Any final questions that might have people thought about as we went through the session in relation to the assessments or the essay, knowing that it's looming, the deadline is looming? Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for your participation today, and I shall see you next week for our final session for the session.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Final session for the session. Okay. Thank you all.
Thanks, Keeds. Thanks, Liz.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Keeds.
Thank
Bye.
you.